This is part 2 of the rest of this particular session, a special report from the acting directory of the Intelligence Bureau pertaining to the whistleblower that blowed the whistle on an unethical move by the President of the United States. Sorry about not being able to capture all of it, but my telephone is getting old and my batteries are starting to get old, and it does not hold the battery value like it used to. So this is the ending part of this particular trial or this particular meeting today, so please listen to the latter.
Sent to other whistleblowers about whether this system really works. If the subject of a complaint can stop that complaint from getting to Congress, then the most serious complaints may never get here. And I want to thank the whistleblower for their courage. They didn't have to step forward. Indeed, we know from the whistleblower complaint there are several others that have knowledge of many of the same events. And I would just say to those several others that have knowledge of those events, I hope that they too would show the same kind of courage and patriotism that this whistleblower has shown. We are dependent on people of good faith to step forward when they see evidence of wrongdoing. The system won't work otherwise, and I have to say to our friends in Ukraine who may be watching, just how distressing it is that as their country fights to liberate itself from Russian oppression, as it fights to root out corruption in their own country, that what they would be treated to by the President of the United States would be the highest form of corruption in this country. That the President of the United States would be, instead of a champion of democracy and human rights and the rule of law, would instead be reinforcing a message with the new Ukrainian president who was elected to root out corruption, that instead the message that president would be, you can use your Justice Department, just call Bill Barr, you can use our Justice Department to manufacture dirt on an opponent. That's what democracy is. You can use foreign assistance, military assistance, vital assistance as a lever to get another country to do something unethical. The idea that a fellow democracy, a struggling democracy, would hear those messages from the President of the United States. I just want to say to the people of Ukraine, we support you in your fight with Russia. We support you in your struggle for democracy. We support you in your efforts to root out corruption. And what you are witnessing and what you are seeing in the actions of this president is not democracy. It is the very negation of democracy.
It's hypocrisy.
This is democracy. What you saw in this committee is democracy, as ugly as it can be, as personal as it can be, as infuriating as it can be. This is democracy. This is democracy. I think
this is democracy pertaining to scrutinizing what was said and how it was said and in the frame of mind that it was said in. But whenever it comes to what the president is being accused of, is not democracy but hypocrisy. In other words, it's just the very opposite of that in which who we are and what our laws stand for and what we stand for. And that's exactly what I was saying on the front end of this particular trial or this meeting, whatever you want to call it. I was punished for going beyond the boundaries of Weakley County towards going down to Waco, Texas, as well as Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I was punished by various law enforcement agencies as well as this own law enforcement agency right here in Weakley County. Not only by the state or the people that represents the state pertaining to various judges, but I was set up, would be the right word, in the Martin PD, and various law enforcement agencies as well as politicians are aware of this, and they still to this day have yet to move on it towards trying to clear my name, which makes them just as guilty as the people that committed the crime whenever the crime was committed, regardless of the crime that was committed in 2005 or the crime that was committed towards dereliction of duty in Tommy Moore not performing his duties during the time that my younger brother David got taken down on his own property pertaining to attempt to murder, but also since the fact of coming back here of dereliction of duty towards them not understanding how come we was paying so much attention to the people across the road involving children. Similar towards how come Dennis James Jackson drove all the way down to Texas on using his own dime and then went up to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma towards snooping around, finding out the truth about one of the possibly biggest major cover-ups that this American government has ever been a part of. Instead of me being rewarded, I have been punished. And I hope to God that this does not happen to this particular whistleblower that is blowing the whistle on the President of the United States, because what this individual on the right-hand side just said is absolutely correct. Because what Donald Trump done was not democracy. It was more of blackmail. It was more of holding an individual hostage by using one method against another. And that is not what the American people is supposed to be about. Whenever it comes to good standards in the community, whenever it comes to being a ethical, moral person, we are supposed to stand up against aggression. We are supposed to stand up against a crime that's been committed. We are supposed to stand up against the very axes of evil and not participate with the axes of evil. And as far as I am concerned, not only did Tommy Moore and the courts up here in Dresden, Tennessee, go along with immoral behavior that happened in my particular life in 2005 pertaining to falsifying files, but also the legal system, Benjamin Dempsey, as well as Mr. Younger, that now is aware of my testimony and still to this day has yet to see any movement or any confirmation. I would have never thought, under the Good Samaritan laws, that anybody would have seen anything any different than what I've just got through explaining to you. As far as I'm concerned, the people that works under the Directory of Intelligence done just exactly what they was supposed to do, because they seen something or heard something that did not line up with our ethical policies. In other words, we do have boundaries towards what we're going to say, how we're going to say it, and what our intent is towards saying it. And whenever you no longer have those borders that separates good ethical practices versus unethical bad practices, then you have a corrupt system. Then you have a corrupt president. Then you have a corrupt society, especially if you don't stand up against this type of aggression. Let's listen to his final words as this thing is closing.
Director, we are adjourned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And that wraps up just about 3 hours of testimony from the Director of National Intelligence, Joseph McGuire, on the whistleblower complaint that has defined and dominated his very short tenure as Director of National Intelligence. It arrived on us just days into his tenure about 6 weeks ago. It has dominated just about every moment since. And what I think we saw today over these last 3 hours, as the director leaves the room, is a public servant caught in a political and legal trap. A man who received a credible allegation that the President of the United States, and this is in the whistleblower complaint, saying had received information from multiple U.S. government officials that the President of the United States is using the power of his office to solicit interference from a foreign country in the 2020 U.S. election. The question he faced: what do I do with that when the law says I have to give it to Congress, and the President says executive privilege prevents that, and when Congress is demanding to see it? Difficult hearing, John Carl, for the director. But I want to take a step back to begin, and we got at the final question there. What the director did confirm is that he believes the whistleblower acted in good faith. Mm-hmm. That the Inspector General who turned over who wrote the report from the whistleblower was also acting in good faith when he found the whistleblower's complaint credible, and that the Director of National Intelligence also found the complaint so credible that he made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. I mean, again, to take a step back, the Director of National Intelligence made a criminal referral on the President of the United States.
Yeah, and this got lost in a lot of the minutiae of this hearing, but you're exactly right, because the White House is now going to make, and they've already started, wage a campaign to undermine the credibility of the whistleblower and the Inspector General. And what the President's choice to run the intelligence community said is that he believes that the whistleblower and the IG acted in good faith, and that quote, the whistleblower did the right thing. The other thing, George, that I thought was striking in this hearing, we heard from a lot of Republicans. We did not hear a single Republican on that committee defend the actions of the president on that call. In fact, we heard from one, Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio, saying that what the president did was not okay.
And Will Hurd said he thought it should be investigated some more. And Dan Abrams, it appeared that what the Democrats were trying to establish right there is that it simply, in their mind, it made no sense for when you have an allegation about the president to then take that allegation to the White House, because that almost defines the idea that the president is then above the law.
Right. I think that was the strongest argument we heard from the Democrats, was the question, they wouldn't directly answer it, of did you go to the president first? Did you go to the White House with this information? That was certainly an important question. I think the Democrats got way too caught up in these process questions about how the Director of National Intelligence went about deciding whether to bring this to Congress or not. As he said later on, the horse has left the barn. And he's right. The bottom line is we have all the information now. So focusing by...
In other words, the genie's out of the bottle. But pertaining to these policies, it really don't make sense. If you have been victimized and you're a victim, to go to the person that victimized you to ask them for permission to be able to take your charges or your complaints to law enforcement to get their blessings before you ever take it so it can be looked at. It's unproductive. It's a conflict of interest. So the way that it was handled may be a little bit inappropriate by the policy channels that they took, but the fact of the matter is, it was still done.
So many of them, so many times on that issue, I think was a mistake, because the other news that's come out today, as you just summarized, is we have this complaint from the whistleblower. We have the Inspector General having done a preliminary review of that complaint, determined it to be credible and of urgent concern, and now you have the acting Director of National Intelligence saying, I believe it was done in good faith and the right thing, which is in direct contradiction to what the president has been saying.
Absolutely.
Which is, in essence, this was a political hit job.
And that did seem to be the other objective of the Democrats, was to protect the whistleblower and establish the credibility of the whistleblower. Terry Moran, Republicans on the committee, as John Carl pointed out, no one defended what the president had done. They focused on the fact that there were so many leaks here. And even though Director McGuire did not want to say explicitly that Congress should investigate, What we just saw is really the first major public impeachment hearing.
Exactly. And the takeaway for me builds on what you've been talking about there, which is that the president's initial defenses to this allegation have been undermined. He said the whistleblower is a partisan hack. As you point out, McGuire says no, he's operating in good faith, did the right thing. The president and some of his defenders said this is all hearsay, second-hand, third-hand. Well, in the complaint, the whistleblower identifies at least a half a dozen officials, by name or otherwise, by position or function, who can be called to testify, turning hearsay into direct testimony right quick. And then the president says no big deal, nothing really to see here. Well, as we've seen, McGuire, as soon as he heard about this, he knew it was unprecedented, this allegation. White House lawyers moved quickly to secure the record, the transcript of this call in an effort, it seems, to deep six it. And as you pointed out, a couple of Republicans expressed concern, called this, what they are seeing of the behavior of the president, troubling indeed. The president needs a better defense.
Pierre Thomas, Chief Justice Correspondent, this is going to put new scrutiny on the Attorney General, William Barr.
I want to weigh in real quick by saying the way that I see it, it's not a leak, it's a speak. These people spoke out. That's why we got them hired. That's why the taxpayers pay them, is to make sure that we don't have a tyrant up there in the White House that's just going to be able to do and say whatever he wants to do and say at the expense of the American people. That's the reason why the system is set up towards checks and balances. It wasn't a leak. It was a speak. The people done their jobs. They spoke out about what they seen and what they heard and what they understood, what they put together.
As was pointed out in the complaint, in the hearing, that he was mentioned on the phone call. He was part of the complaint, yet it was his Justice Department that determined that the investigation would go no further.
It is indeed. The Attorney General's name was invoked by the President. He's also the person who oversees the chief law enforcement agency of the country. Also, there will be questions about, did the Justice Department look too narrowly at this issue, only looking at the issue of whether there was a campaign finance violation. And George, I will tell you, just watching this hearing, the conflict in Director McGuire. On the one hand, he was obviously concerned about matters of privilege, executive privilege involving the White House. On the other hand, he's looking at a complaint in which one of the allegations involves whether White House lawyers directed information to be put in a more secure and secret system, and at the same time, the first place that he went was to ask the White House counsel about how this should be handled.
That is going to lead to so many questions. Martha Raddatz, Director McGuire, 36 years, 37 years as a Navy SEAL, only 6 weeks in this job as Director of National Intelligence. One of the things he said in his opening statement, I am not partisan, I am not political, yet he was right in the middle of a partisan and political fight today, and clearly uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable, and especially there in the end with Adam Schiff. He was really dancing around what he could say, what he could not say. But I think at the heart of this is that national security argument. He said the most important challenge for U.S. intelligence is maintaining the integrity of our elections, not a kinetic strike by North Korea or Iran, but maintaining the integrity of our elections. That is at the heart of this matter. He was also asked, is it okay for a president to pressure, any president, to pressure a foreign government for help to win an election? McGuire said it is unwarranted, it is unwelcome, it is bad for the nation to have outside interference of any foreign power, George.
And that's why Chairman Schiff said the investigation is continuing. We're going to go to Tom Yamas in Kiev. So much of this complaint, so much of the whistleblower's complaint suggesting that any phone call with the president, any further meetings and aid from the United States were dependent on the Ukraine picking up this investigation into the Bidens, echoing what you had been hearing over the summer and from people in the Ukraine.
That's right. We spoke with a former advisor to the current Ukrainian president who told us just that there was an understanding with Ukrainian officials that to get a meeting with President Trump, they had to play by some ground rules, and those ground rules dealt with having to talk about the Biden investigation. But I should be clear about this. There wasn't a Biden investigation ever in Ukraine. It was an investigation into a company called Burisma that Hunter Biden worked for. Now, when you go to the whistleblower complaint, George, it's amazing. This almost reads word for word from what we were told by this former advisor. It says, multiple U.S. officials told me the Ukrainian leadership was led to believe that a meeting or a phone call between the president and President Zelensky would depend on whether Zelensky showed willingness to, quote, play ball, George. Something else we learned, Rudy Giuliani has spoken to at least 5 former and current Ukrainian officials about issues related to President Trump and this Burisma investigation. We just spoke to somebody who was mentioned in that whistleblower complaint, a former Ukrainian diplomat. We just spoke to him moments ago. We asked him, what did Rudy Giuliani want to know? And he basically was asking this former diplomat, how would you get an investigation reopened? In essence, how would you try to get this Burisma investigation possibly reopened in the Ukrainian courts? That's the kind of things that Giuliani was looking for. I spoke with a former prosecutor, Victor Shokin. This is the prosecutor that Vice President Biden wanted gone because there was widespread criticism that he wasn't rooting out corruption in Ukraine. When I spoke to this former prosecutor, he says he spoke to Giuliani as well. And what did they speak about? They spoke about the bias.
And Tom, but just to underscore, the prosecution, the case that they did pursue, that the prosecution did pursue, found no evidence of wrongdoing by Joe Biden or Hunter Biden.
That's right, and we have to really be clear about this because Republicans said some things in the hearing we just heard that weren't true. Now, Burisma was under investigation. They found no wrongdoing. Burisma ended up paying some fines. That is all true. They were investigated for money laundering and for illegal gas contracts. The issue with Hunter Biden is how he got that job, why he got that job. He had no experience in the Ukraine, he had no known experience in the energy sector, and he gets the job right when Vice President Biden is working on behalf of the Obama administration. That was the entire issue. The Bidens themselves, to be clear, were not being investigated.
Okay, Tom Yamas, thanks very much. I want to go to our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce. We heard those final words from the chairman. This is going to continue to be investigated. And now Director McGuire going to go to the Senate Intelligence Committee for a hearing behind closed doors. This is just the beginning.
Georgie has a very long afternoon up here, a lot more questions, and it is interesting. We are beginning to see now some growing concern from Republicans. I've been talking with Republican members in the hallway here outside of the hearing room, and even members who are usually quick to come to the president's defense admit that this matter does deserve more investigating. And it's not just the call, as we've heard some Republicans now pointing out to the president, it simply was not okay, his action on that call. We are hearing from some Republicans who are reportedly raising concern about the fact that White House officials, according to this complaint, tried to restrict the report of that call. So, George, we're seeing this slowly growing drift of increasing concern from Republicans, and it is critical because if Democrats are going to have any hope of being successful in impeaching and convicting the president, of course, it is going to be Republicans who will tip that scale. A lot of questions up here on the Hill. It's going to continue this afternoon.
It certainly is. President Trump has now left New York, not answering questions on the way out about this morning's hearing. Perhaps we'll hear from him later this afternoon. But again, the House Intelligence Committee has wrapped up their hearing with the Director of National Intelligence, Joseph McGuire, about this whistleblower complaint, explosive whistleblower complaint, alleging abuse of power by President Trump. We're going to have much more on our streaming channel, ABC News Live, and of course a full wrap-up tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir. Have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
I don't know of those that occasionally view my channel on my platform, but what it required today of a break-in of news channels right here, the taxpayers basically had to fit the bill on every commercial that has been already prepaid by Kellogg's, by food commercials, by medical commercials, by other types of commercials, that whenever there's an ABC special report like this, or NBC or CBS, I don't know how many of them covered it today, but whenever this is done this way, it costs the taxpayers lots of money to break into all these programs that's already been prepaid, just so the major networks can take over your TV network station on that particular network. So this is serious. This is significant. not only monetarily but also morally, pertaining to a president that obviously does not understand the moral ethics of professionalism towards what to say and how to say it. And I don't know if the guy is just really and truly just a loose cannon in that degree towards being that unprofessional, or if maybe there's another motive in behind it, towards leaning more towards tyranny, of being a dictator, a tyrant. I don't know. I haven't reached into Donald Trump's heart and Donald Trump's mind towards understanding just exactly what's going on with him. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know that even he knows. Because he may be simply just a loose cannon. He may be simply somebody that is unhinged, that does not know the difference between the power of the purse versus somebody that's out there talking loosely and lavishly the way that I'm doing right now, that does not understand the difference. I don't know. We may not never know his true intent, but I guarantee you one person that does, and that's God Almighty. God Almighty knows what's in behind Donald Trump's motives. God knows Donald Trump better than Donald Trump knows himself. So maybe this is all being brought out to the American people for a reason, to be able to stop something that could wind up being devastating for not only the American government, but the American democracy. Once more, our founders, our builders, our ancestors put these checks and balances in place to prevent from abuse of power, the power of the purse to be handled in such of a unethical, professional way. Thank you for listening, and good luck to all of us, and shalom here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255 at the Windmill Ministries Missions. Thank you, and good luck, and shalom.